Well, I know a few of you have been waiting for this one. This is the RGT Tracer, the EX86180 Pro. And it's been around for a little while. And this is a little bit of an unusual mishmash. You guys remember the Red Cat Ascent Fusion, obviously. That thing had some interesting design decisions, and this is actually going to be another one of those. It's got its own little quirks and stuff. I've only been looking at it for about literally 30 seconds and I know nothing about it. I didn't even know it had carbon fiber rails till I pulled it out of the box. Let us experience this model together, then we're going to hit the rocks. I'm at the Yu-Yangs today, once again, which means my dog's having more surgery, which is why I come here, because the hospital's that way. Let's take a look at this car, see what we can see what makes it tick, see if it's any good, because it's a four-wheel steering beastie with some premium parts and some strange design decisions. Maybe it'll still be good. Let's have a look. Now in Australia, we've been driving a tough truck class at our competitions called Pricey's Custom Crawlers Tough Truck, or Pricey's Tough Truck, and it's been a bunch of fun. That thing was built for Capras and tube buggies and stuff like that, right? Now this wouldn't actually qualify for Tough Truck because it's got plate rails, but it does have four-wheel steering, and Tough Truck lets you have four-wheel steering, it lets you have dig. It's a 1.9 class. So this is half of a Tough Truck, half of a weird scale mashup thing. Honestly, I mean, the body's not that different to what you'll get on the SCX10 Pro or the Vanquish offerings. I mean, obviously it's different, but it's that kind of style, you know, everything's kind of been optimized for crawling. And yet we have like heavy metal. This is a strange model. I almost don't know where to start. What I'll do is I'll just show you the thing top to bottom, okay? First of all, it comes with the FlySky, with the F4G, I think it is, FS-G4P. Now that's a 4-channel system with a 3-channel switch here that we're not going to use, and channel 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, cycles through your 4 modes. I'll get to that when we power it up. We've got 1.9 tyres, so-called Baja Pro XS. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. It is glued. That's strange. Maybe this ring's just there for decoration and that's why it's... oh yeah. So they're glued tyres. Alright. We've got 15 kilogram servos at each end. And it's full metal axle with portals. Now while the axle's being clocked forward, you still got quite an angle on this drive shaft here, like unnecessarily so. I reckon they could have just notched it back up a little and just helped that out, because that's the first thing that's going to kiss the ground or the rocks underneath. And this design isn't known for being super strong, although this is steel and I haven't tested this yet. We've got what looks to be unshielded bearings, so I suppose they're not expecting you to get this thing wet, and fair enough. I did notice little notches here underneath on the chassis, just while I'm picking at stuff at the start here. There's not actually sufficient clearance. The axle gets pushed down. When I see a design like this, or like we have with the Ascent Fusion, it's a little bemusing because they had a blank slate when they designed this. When you're modifying stuff and you introduce some new feature or change the geometry, and if something's not quite right like this, where if you steer and it pushes the axle away from the chassis, okay, fair enough, you're changing the car from how it was designed, right? But it was designed like this. They could have changed it, but they didn't. It's not clear to me why they didn't, but it baffles me a little when you're designing something why you wouldn't make it just right at the start. People might mod it later and, you know, mess things up a bit, fine, but why? Anyway, so there's no interior and you wouldn't expect one on a car like this. The windows are tinted, which is cool. It's two-tone body with stickers and whatnot. Nothing wrong with the body. If you don't like this engine thing, you can remove it, but it's sunk into the mold, so you're kind of stuck with it, or it'll look bad. So here it is. This is a somewhat strange design. Being that it's four-wheel steering, and you're going to put the body on it, and you're going to have bumpers on it, does it really need to be different at each end to the point where it stuffs up your geometry? I'm not sure. We've got bent links at each end, but the bent links aren't doing a heck of a lot because the drive shafts are below. Again, a high opinion point, or at least just turning these axles around, See, here's the thing. If you turn the axles in, it'll pick the drive shaft up and make it straighter. And then you can always turn the axle outers around on many axles, which is actually what you'd do to fix this. But they're keyed, so there's metal inside this, so you cannot rotate your axles. You're actually stuck with that's the angle for the rear, and the angle for the front's actually quite a bit more significant. It's almost as laid back as these shocks, interestingly. Speaking of which, they're aluminium, oil filled, and they've been filled. Gosh, they feel nice. They're silent, so they've been bled correctly when they were assembled. They move beautifully. Yeah, that's nice. Being carbon fiber with a bunch of cross members, it's pretty rigid, but it relies on the plastic skid in the middle for rigidity as well. And even though it's actually 4mm, yeah, 4mm carbon fiber, there's plenty of movement in that middle piece, the skid. Not a criticism, just an observation. There's a lot of rattling. One thing I look for on especially more extreme crawlers, or intended to be extreme crawlers, is I look for pinion wiggle. So I pull this back and forth to see if there's any movement between the gears in it, the pinion and the crown. There's nothing in the front, and there's almost nothing in the back. The mesh is good. Looking at the pictures on the box, they're straight cut gears, so that is actually best for engagement when there's movement, but it's better if they're spiral cut, helical cut, whatever. Not a big deal. Now, this front bumper has metal D-rings on it, D-shackles. We've got a fair lead, and there's a spot for a winch, and there's clearance for the winch, that servo winch. It would look kind of odd because it would sit up right behind that, but I mean, you could also, you just put the servo there, but you're not going to do that. And the receiver lives in there. It's not particularly light for being carbon fiber, but they are metal axles, and that's probably where most of the mass is, honestly. It's a 20-turn 550 motor. 20-turn, it means it's got to be 5-pole. It says a 20-turn super torque motor, and it says it's a 1060 ESC. Okay. It says it takes 2 and 3S LiPo, 2.76 kilograms. There is additional brass and stuff available for this with RGT's branding, but quite honestly, with those metal axles, I don't think it's going to be needed. Aluminium on the outside, which will stick on rock, but I think it's aluminium. And then plastic, well, they're kind of grabby though. Yeah, there is actually overdrive. It doesn't say it anywhere on the box, and I didn't see it in the manual, but I just measured by lining up the B on the tire, on both of them, and then rotating it. And the first time it was forward a little, then forward again. This feels like under 10% overdrive, but it does have overdrive. I'm going to guess 7% looking at it. Any overdrive helps on a crawler, that's great. I can't speak to assembly yet because, like, has there been thread lock used and whatnot? Don't know. That'll make itself known on the rocks. I do see that you could convert both these axles to having panhards, which is actually really thoughtful, given that they're, you know, they're metal, so it's actually quite difficult to mod. There are also screw holes front and rear on this housing. They go right through, which also gives you actually a little bit more choice on modification or using these axles elsewhere in future. So there's a lot to like on this thing. I can't help but feel it's going to be clunky, but you know what? I could be wrong. I'd love to be wrong. Why don't we stick a battery in? I'll show you the steering modes and we'll get it on the rocks. Now, I like this radio because it gives us the ability to set endpoints from memory. You can turn it all the way one way and adjust your dual rate, turn it all the other way and adjust your dual rate. More complex radios don't necessarily have that. We're going to start with 2S. It says it's 2 and 3 compatible. Alright, that's going to be a bit loose because this battery's small. I mean, it's not actually that small, 3000 milliamp hour. But here's a trick. What you do is you bring the loop up under it like that and then just pull the top over it. So instead of the battery going through the strap's kind of doubling around the battery. So we've drastically shortened the strap. Now that's in. It does have sides too. You can adjust these and bring them in. So there are holes there. You can't slide them, but you undo and then move them both in, which you probably want to do, honestly. This is spaced for a brick. Right, power on. Power switch is there. Oh, and alternate direction shafts. I meant to mention that before too. Now, there's a worrying amount of slop in these. And it's coming from a couple of places actually. But this one in particular feels very loose. What's going on here? Oh, the screw's not even down all the way. I can turn it by hand. I wonder, when you get an RTR, gee, I miss having kits all the time. When you get an RTR, you can't always trust that the screws are thread locked. All right, one sec, getting a tool. You like this? That's my screw bag. It's not currently for sale. It's got an RC-TNT logo on it. I did a test with Spreadshop. I've got a few other things for sale on my Spreadshop shop. Just go to rctnt.com and press on shop and you can get not many things. I've only got 3 things on there at the moment. I had more, but I took them off. Keep it simple. Now, it was the back. Yes, it was. So this guy here, I'm going to pull him out and we're going to check it for thread lock. There's no evidence of thread lock on that. In the dark ages, they'd test to see if someone was a witch by throwing them in the water. I'm going somewhere with this. And if she could swim, she was a witch. Or if she floated, she was a witch. And if she drowned, she wasn't. I mentioned the witch thing because if you want to check if the screws had thread lock on it or not, sometimes you've got to break the lock that it would have had. Nah, this isn't thread locked. This brings into question whether the whole car has been thread locked at all, and I have a feeling not. But yeah, the parallel is that once you break the lock, you've got to apply it again anyway, so you don't really come out ahead. We have to go and do a bunch of screws. I'm going to do a few of them now. This thing has a slipper. There's the cover. It's 2 screws to pull that off, and you can adjust the slipper. This makes me wonder, seeing these axles, yeah, that one was loose as. What about all the other screws on this thing, huh? Now, they say they've got rubber sealed ball bearings on the box. It says that for the transmission, it's got rubber sealed bearings. I'll tell you what, they're not rubber sealed on the ends of the axles here. I can see. They're just got a metal ring on it. There's no rubber seal there. Let's just do the other end. It's going to need it as well. You'll also notice stainless steel ball links or ball ends in the rod ends and in the shocks. That's really good. I'll tell you one thing that's worth checking also is the thread lock on the drive shafts. Has that been done? Probably not. Anyone who's had a crawler and hasn't used thread lock will be nodding along. This is very necessary. Screws just work themselves out on a crawler. They just do. On most cars actually. It's anytime you've got metal, screws going into metal, you need thread lock. You can't not. There's no behind the axle steering here. It's 40.5 degree and 41.5 degree at full throw, the steering. So it's very mild Ackerman. The actual steering angle is not crash hot either. And they are CVDs, not unis in here. But the steering angle doesn't have to be super crazy on a 4-wheel steering rig because it gives you so much more steering. Thankfully, so that's not a bad thing. Yeah, none of these are thread locked. They're all just loose. You wouldn't think this matters on a cross member, but it really does. Stuff just works itself loose when you're crawling. This is a strange oversight for an RTR. It's nice to see they've got nylock nuts wherever possible. That's great. But I do wonder, like, what about the servo? What about the rest of the diffs, the brackets? I don't think thread lock's been used at all. Now, what else do I need to tell you? The radio takes 4 AA's, and you can't independently steer if you're wondering. You have to use the button to cycle between the modes. Front steer, crab steer, 4-wheel steer. So crab is when they're in the same direction. Then 4-wheel steer, opposite, and then just rear steer is the 4th mode. And so it cycles through. Now, servo, how that had a snap to it. We'll leave that. I might just do the drive shafts and we'll get this video underway. These ones really matter. That could actually be thread locked. It has a feel to it. Yeah, it is, thankfully. All right. Oh, it doesn't go all the way through though. Okay, so this is kind of my point at the intro. There are some weird decisions here. It's like they've tried to build a premium car, but it's just so not premium in a few ways. It's an odd thing. Not complaining. And remember also, this is an older RGT vehicle. The new stuff, all the new cars that we've done recently have been designed and made much more recently. So this is an interesting one, but it is old. Right, let's get it on. And the reason that matters that it's old is that any lessons they've learned, all right, here we go while we're talking. Any lessons they've learned with their design, they can't apply this to an older one. So one button press, crab, next one, four wheel, next one, just rear, and then back to the front. Pretty straightforward. This fella doesn't do anything, so you've got a spare channel there and the receiver is separate, which is great. Steering trim is, end points are adjusted with this. And then let's see if we can do the rear as well. All right, rear. Oh, no, we can't. That's unfortunate. You can't do rear trim. That's weird. Let me just make sure that the front's not been changed. There we go. Good. All right, let's hit the rocks. So it goes at a brisk walking speed at top speed. This is in 2S. And onto our very first time crawling with this thing. Now I've been practicing with four-wheel steering for quite some time, and I rather like having independent control with like a thumb to steer, like, you know, a thumb to steer the second, like the rear wheels while I do the front. Having to cycle through this is a bit laborious, but, you know, that's all right. Rear does have its benefits, even like this. But having to jump through all the different modes just to get up a rock is, well, it can be a bit fiddly. Now, having said that, this is, okay, so I don't want it to crab. Or maybe we'll get away with it. Oh, so having to cycle means you lose your position. When I took that front wheel off, then I lost where my front wheels were. They straightened up and it destabilized the car. What's the drag brake like? Yeah, that's pretty good. So the rate is, if this was a 1080, the rate is like about half, but the strength is plenty. Now we've got opposite spinning drive shafts and we've got portals, so there shouldn't be a lot of torque twist. But see how it's kind of squatting to the left when it accelerates? We're on a very steep hill, so this is where anything like this will be the most pronounced. We might just add a bit of preload, see what happens. So I've added preload to the left and taken it away from the right. Not much, mind you. It's still pretty bad though. Oh well. Honestly, with a body this light compared to where all the weight is, it's just cosmetic, really. Now let's see how it side hills. We'll bring it, yeah, look, we'll try and descend first. I wouldn't mind seeing the drag brake come in a bit faster than that. It kind of activates a little slowly for my liking. It's pretty planted, and even mediocre tires, which I think these probably are, they're really helped by all that mass in the axles. It makes a big fat difference. But see how slippery they are? Yeah, they don't feel like crash hot tires. They're not terrible, mind you. They're vented, they've got foam in them. They are glued and the wheels aren't heavy, and that's okay. You don't want heavy wheels, especially with metal axles. This is probably plenty. But just better tires would probably be useful here. My biggest challenge here with technical crawling is that I cannot, like, changing modes is a destabilizing thing. So you really have to plan for when you're going to change it. Now, what about servo strength? What do we think of that? Look, it's pretty reliable. Look at that. That's not bad for out of the box. It's not bad at all. I'll need to get this on the 6 problems as well. We just lost power with the fully charged 2S, and then it's come back in. Why? Wonder why. I don't know why we lost power then. That's odd. Nope, there it goes again. Could be a bad LiPo, that's my guess. Let's have a look. Okay, now we're on 3S. That does jogging speed now. Now, I haven't got a battery tester on me. What we're going to do is just keep asking it to do a little bit of technical crawling here, because what I want to know is the little BEC browning out in the WP1060? That's my feeling. It is. Alright, so we've got a problem here. And she doesn't come back on either. Weird. I'm just going to test once more. I'm pretty sure this is the BEC. So BEC, battery eliminator circuit, that's the thing inside the ESC in this case. It used to be separate. This comes with the speed controller, and it's what gives the lower voltage to the servo on the receivers. So in this case, I'm pretty sure it's 6 volt on the 1060. Could be 5 volt. It's 5 or 6, whatever it is. And it's what's giving the power to the servos. Now, this ESC is also busily giving power to the motor as I increase the throttle. And so there are two different electrical things going on in the heart of this thing, right? When you've got a crawler like this with 2 servos, especially when they're working, you're asking more of everything, but particularly of that BEC. Because we're asking it to provide power to both the servos and to the motor through those 2 different circuits. And it was getting quite warm, even on 2S. It failed on 2S. So there we go. Sometimes it could be a bad LiPo that causes a brownout like that before. But it happened even on the 3S battery, so it's not the LiPo. This is most likely, and I was also just checking my radio battery, but they're fully charged. I did it before I came here. I think what we're dealing with here is a ESC that's not up to the job. A little bit more weight in the front would help, or even less weight in the rear, that'd be nice. It is very heavy. Come on. Nope. Get that rear around. Come on. Just can't quite grab it. Wants to grab there. It'd be nice if this thing had a dig. That would be cool. It's just on the edge of traction. There we go. Couldn't have done that without four-wheel steering. She's a heavy beastie. For having such a lot of mass underneath her, it's yeah, it's odd. We've got a battery thing poking out here too. I'm not yet sure what I think of this car. It was definitely ambitious of RGT, and I commend them for trying something different, particularly in that it happened. Hang on, we want rear steer here. This came before, there we go, you see that? This came along before the current spate of super crawlers out of the box, like the Vanquish and Axial stuff. So that was ambitious. Is there enough right with this car that I like it, when there are clearly some weaknesses? I do think that was a BEC issue, but I'm not completely sure. Look, it's quite balanced and poised. I'd be reluctant to add more weight. I'd really prefer plastic axles and a bit of mass just on the outsides, honestly, but given we've got metal to work with, yeah, you know, it's still pretty good. Like, this right here is challenging. I think there are situations where this thing will actually do quite well. And for an out-of-the-box fun machine, particularly if the price is good, yeah, that's not bad, is it? Overall, I think I like this thing. This thing's not without its flaws. We're just going to give it a stress test real quick. She's not browning out. This is less of a stress. Why was it browning out? My problem is it happened with the 3S and the 2S batteries, so I thought it might just be a bad 2S battery, because that could happen. But no, it was happening on the 3S battery as well. That's an issue. The ESC is warm tending to hot, but it's not hot. Motor's not even warm. And with the speeds that we've seen here, being that it's a 20 turn, this must be a 5-pole or a 3-pole that's just geared quite high. I don't know. Tyres are a little firm. I'd like to see them flex a little bit more. The tread's not too bad. The compound's not too bad. 4.7 inches they are. Yeah, look, it's all right. I've just found more screws that are loose. The ones holding the these C-hubs to the axles, they're loose as well. If you get a Tracer, go over it with thread lock. I already started it on camera, but clearly more needs to be done. Should you buy it? What are its competitors? If you were to get an Ecto, especially in the USA where most of you are watching this, the Ecto with another front axle from Element to give you 4-wheel steering and a different radio to make that happen, that wouldn't be a bad choice. It will perform better than this, particularly once you get some brass on the outside of the front axles only. And the stock Element tyres aren't too bad. If you can get RGT and you like the Tracer, you like the idea of it, and you've got thread lock ready to go, you could do a lot worse. This is not a bad crawler. Next video with this car, I'll get it onto the 6 problems. It's going to do all 6, I suspect, but maybe not. The downside of all this weight underneath, particularly also being on the rear, is that it's still got to haul itself up and over obstacles. This is just loose. Everything's just loose. Treat it like a half-finished kit. You really want to get the thread lock in. I've said enough about that. I don't mind the car. I like the thoughtful inclusions. I'd give it a solid 6 out of 10 for an out-of-the-box crawler, maybe even 6.5. Yeah, it's not terrible. There you go. RGT Tracer, it's not terrible. Thanks for watching, guys. Throw me a like. Oh, and thank you to my channel supporters. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for your support. I'll stick a link in the description on where you can find it. If you have any thoughts about the car, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll catch you again on RC-TNT. Cheers.